This apple tree was grown from a cutting. I grew it from a cutting taken in autumn. Once the leaves fall off in autumn or early winter, it was taken then, once the leaves had fallen off. And I don't know if you can do it with all apple trees, but this sort of apple tree you can do it with. I'm not sure if it's a delicious apple. It was planted in the 1930s, this tree, and I got a cutting from it. Not all apple trees are like this, but this sort of apple tree has these little lumpy nodes on the side. And if you cut a branch on this sort of apple tree that's got those lumpy things, those lumps will turn into roots in winter, provided you take your cutting in late autumn, early winter. If you take a cutting with a lump on, some of those lumps on the end, they will grow and develop roots before spring. There's quite a sizable branch. Would be a little bit too big for me to use, but you could cut it about there and plant the stake out, or cut it further up. There's more of them further up, those lumpy things. The lumps will become the roots of your new tree. So these ones are a little bit too thick really. They've got to establish their roots before spring, and then you've got to keep them well watered for the next season, all through the spring and all through the summer. So you don't want them to be too demanding. For me, that branch would be too thick. But where I'd cut it off about there. And I'd plant the stick in a huge bucket, like a plastic garbage tin that had holes drilled in the bottom, or I'd put it in the ground. In either case, whether it's in a large pot or in the ground, it's going to have to be well staked, because otherwise the wind will be blowing it and that'll be putting strain on the roots that you're trying to develop. There's one of ideal size just there. I'd cut it about there, say. I'd cut it about there, and I'd put the stick in, and with those node things, those lumpy things, well submerged in the soil, and I'd put a big stake to hold it in position, and I'd keep it well watered, either in a pot or in the ground, and making sure it didn't dry out during that first spring, and getting it through that summer. And then you've got quite a sizable tree. Of course, you can trim the branches up the top a bit if you like. I don't know that all apple trees develop these nodes or whatever they're called on the side, but this is quite a nice branch. It's a small tree really. If you planted that, you could lop off some of the top branches, but if you plant all this, say, cut it off from about there, those things will all produce roots during the winter time, and by springtime you'll have a whole lot of white roots, and you'll have a young tree if you can keep it alive for that first year. So you've got quite a sizable tree. I've done it, and yes, I wouldn't use anything much thicker than this though. You might be able to get away with it, but it's when you're a brand new young tree, you've got all that old wood to sustain, so it mightn't be a good idea. In any case, you can quickly grow a brand new apple tree on this type of apple tree that makes these sort of nodes that become roots. It's very handy to know if you want an instant apple tree. So here we are. There's a good sized branch that could become a new tree. And there's the lumps you'll be looking out for, those lumpy things, those lumpy nodes there. They'll become the roots of your new tree, provided you can keep it moist enough. Oops, there they are. They will become roots. And it's a handy thing to know, and you can have a quick tree very quickly. A fast growing tree. A good sized tree to start with, rather than waiting a couple of years. Handy to know. So if you ever see an apple tree growing by the side of the road that you think, oh, I'd like to have a sample of that tree, see if it's got those sort of nodes on it. And it's a quick way to grow a brand new tree. Lovely quick way to grow a new tree, because those nodes will become roots. You could probably cut a V out there out of this tree too, and as long as you've got some of those nodes in a branch, it will grow into a new tree. So it's handy to know. This branch here is quite a good one. I'd cut it off about there and plant it out, and those would form roots. And it's not too thick, is it? It's quite a nice size for a brand new young sapling. And yes, quite a nice size. Quite a nice size. And you'd have a nice little young adult, well, not an adult tree, but a teenage tree straight away after that season. It wouldn't take very long. So we'd go from about there, and then we've got a young tree. We could take it to about there. That would be nice, and it would probably do quite well, one of that size. Yes, basically you're going to get the tree about the size that the nursery would sell anyway, aren't you, basically? And without waiting all that time for one. Here's a young tree here too. There's a young branch with some nice lumps on the side. Those lumps would become roots, yes. They've got those lumpy root sort of things. They're not like ordinary buds. They look like a bit like roots. They become roots, and it's handy to know. Happy gardening anyway. There's an ideal one just there, just the right size exactly. See the nodes there? They'll become roots, and you've got a perfect little tree all ready to start. Just plant it out in early winter, late autumn, and the roots will be established by spring. Make sure the tree is well anchored with the stake so it doesn't get moved at all. You want those roots to develop happily and quickly, and then you've just got to get it through the next season, and you'll have an instant apple tree. Good luck with it. So here's what would make a good, reasonable tree. There's your lumpy node there. Preferably it's better if you've got more than one lumpy node, but to increase your chances, but there's a lumpy node. So you cut it off about there and plant it in the ground, about a foot under make sure it's well under the ground. And then you've got the rest of the tree. What you've got here is a young tree, isn't it, basically? You could trim off a few branches to make it, just to reduce the transplant shock. And you've actually got what's basically a nice young tree. I'd trim off some of the smaller branches, and yes, you've got an instant tree. It's lots of fun to grow trees that way. It's so quick, and it saves you money too, doesn't it? It does. Just look out for the nodes. And there's the telltale nodes, the larger ones. Just look out for those telltale nodes. If you see an apple tree in a forest or growing on the side of the road, you know what to look for, because those nodes mean that those branches will grow very easily during the winter time when the tree is asleep. Thanks for watching.